Hello, the problem of today is from Robin C.O. Matthews and is strongly structured and clear cut and needs a good analysis to be appreciated as it needs. If you want to solve it, you can do, but you must afterwards have a look at all the content very carefully. You will find under the diagram, under the video, you will find the position in Fen, in also the position in algebraic notation, also the solution in algebraic notation, and also a description of the thematic content. So let's start immediately and have a look at what happens here. The king is kept from many sides, but have two flights on. The king has two flights on d6 and on e6. c6 is controlled by the bishop and blocked by the pawn. c5 is controlled by the bishop and by the knight d3. c4 is blocked by the pawn and is not controlled by any white piece. d4 is controlled only by the bishop, and the knight controls e4. The square on e5 is controlled by the pawn f4 and by the knight d3. So you have the two flights that I told you, and now you have also to be complete, we have to show that if the king goes to these flights, the other squares are well kept. c7 is blocked, d7 is controlled by the bishop, e7 is controlled by the pawn f6, f7 is controlled by the bishop, f6 is controlled by the g5 pawn, and f5 is blocked and also controlled by the white knight on g3. So you see that you have a battery, queen, rook, that is aiming at the black king, and we understand quite easily that the rook will go to d2 or to e2 in order to control the squares on the two columns d or e. Now after what we said, we can understand that to give mate, we have with white to control d5, d6 and e6, and if we make that and we are not in danger by the black defenders, we'll get the mate. So we may understand that we'll organize a threat on the 8th rank, and then the defenses by black will be on to play mainly to play the rooks on the 8th rank. So let's have a look at what is in the set play. For example, rook b8. If black play rook b8, we see that when the king will go to d6 after a move of the, let's say the rook is giving check like that, if the king goes to d6, the queen will give mate on c6. But if the king goes to e6, we'll have no mate. So we have to choose the right square with the rook in order to organize a mate on e6. When the black rook abandoned the control of c5, so we have a possibility to mate on c5 when the king is on e6 by knight c5. So the rook will go to d2 in order to control d6. So I show it. Rook to b8, we play rook d2. If the king goes to d6, queen takes c6, and if the king goes to e6, knight c5, because the rook controls now d6, and because the black rook do not guard anymore the c5 square. On the other move, rook a8, we'll have now we can mate because the rook abandoned the control of the second rank. So we'll do on that way. Rook e2, if the king goes to d6, made by queen c6, and if the king goes to e6, made by bishop to c5, that controls the square by the bishop and give mates straight with the rook, because there is no more control from a2 by the black rook. So after rook b8 we played rook d2. After rook e8 we play rook e2. So we said that we want to organize a threat on the 8th rank. The simple way and the effective way to do it is d6, d7, threatening queen on d8 and threatening, and afterwards to give mate on d7. So this is a very strong threat. Let's have a look at what we have with these moves that we showed in the set play. Rook b8, and now we can see a very big change that happens with the key. When we played d6, d7, we closed the line of the bishop, and then when the king goes now to d6, there is no more mate by queen c6. But also when we played d6, d7, we opened the line c6, e6, and then when the king goes to e6, then we can have a mate on by queen takes c6. So now white will have to manage to organize a mate not when the king is on e6, but when the king is on d6. So when the rook goes in the solution to b8, we play rook e2, and if the king goes to d6, bishop c5, and if, as I said, the king goes to e6, queen takes c6, mate. So on the other move, rook a8, now we'll have rook d2. If the king goes to e6, queen takes c6, and if the king goes to d6, knight c5, because the rook can mate, the knight controls now e6, and you have a good mate. So we can see here that there is an exchange of moves between the set play and the solution, and it is rather simple to see and rather difficult to see also, to understand very well how it has been organized. It's a very, very fine mechanism, and you are invited to have a deep look on this. Now let's have a look at the rest of the play. You have the threat is d7, d8 equal queen. If knight f7, bishop takes and queen mates. If the pawn c4, let's say, takes on d3, you play queen. Of course, rook, king e6, queen d7 like in the thread, but you have king c4, queen d4, and if the king goes to e6, you go also to a queen, threatening on d7. The rook can defend, and then you will have queen e7 mate. So with a simple key you have very big changes, you have very rich play of batteries. The rook is first the front piece of a battery queen rook, and then the rear piece of two batteries. All in all, a very nice problem, and a little bit piece of work to understand well the mechanism. I hope you'll enjoy it, and have a good day. Thank you.